The cigarette smoke hung thick in the concrete hallway behind San Quentin's main stage. Johnny Cash stood alone near a rusted metal door, his black suit absorbing what little light the fluorescent bulbs offered. He could hear the crowd gathering in the yard. 1,500 inmates, guards with rifles positioned on the catwalks. The warden had warned him twice already that morning about keeping the performance short, keeping it safe, keeping it controlled. But nobody was thinking about the performance, because 20 feet away, leaning against the cold prison wall with a whiskey bottle in his hand, Merle Haggard was staring at Johnny Cash like a man preparing for violence. And what Merle said in the next 3 minutes wouldn't just end a friendship. It would force Cash to confront a question he'd been avoiding for over a decade. A question about authenticity, about pain, about whether a man who'd never served real time had any right to profit from singing about prison walls. This is that story. Merle Haggard was born in a converted railroad boxcar in Oildale, California, in 1937. His childhood was poverty so deep it felt like drowning. His father died when Merle was 9, and something broke inside him after that. By his teenage years, he was stealing cars, robbing, running. By 1957, at 20 years old, Merle was sitting in San Quentin State Prison serving time for attempted robbery. Cell Block D, Tier 3, inmate number A45200. San Quentin wasn't rehabilitation. It was storage for broken men. Merle saw stabbings, saw guards beat inmates unconscious, saw men go into solitary and come out changed, something vital scraped out of them. The food was barely edible. The concrete was always cold. Time moved differently inside those walls, slower and heavier, like trying to walk through deep water. But on January 1st, 1958, something unusual happened at San Quentin. A country singer came to perform for the inmates. Not a big star, not yet. Just a man in black with a guitar and a song about shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die. His name was Johnny Cash. Merle sat in the audience that day, just another inmate in gray prison clothes. He watched Cash walk onto that makeshift stage like he belonged there, like he understood something about the men sitting before him. And when Cash sang Folsom Prison Blues, Merle felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt seen, like maybe someone on the outside remembered that men like him still existed. That performance changed Merle's life. He got out of prison in 1960 and decided to pursue music seriously. By 1969, he'd become one of country music's biggest stars. Okie from Muskogee, Mama Tried, Sing Me Back Home, songs about working-class struggle, about the outlaw life, about prison and redemption. He'd made it. He was successful. He was legitimate. But there was something that bothered Merle. Something that grew sharper every time he saw Johnny Cash's name on another prison concert poster, another album cover, another headline, because Johnny Cash had built an empire on prison music. The man in black who sang for convicts had become one of the most famous musicians in America. Prison concerts were his signature, his brand, his mythology. But Johnny Cash had never done real time. He'd spent a few nights in jail here and there, 7 times total, mostly for pills or public intoxication, overnight stays, maybe a weekend, but never years, never the kind of time that changes you, never waking up every morning knowing you're going to die in a concrete box if you're not careful. And Merle knew this. Everyone in the industry knew this, but nobody talked about it because Johnny Cash's heart seemed pure. His prison advocacy seemed genuine. The inmates loved him. The wardens respected him. His concerts brought hope to places where hope was contraband. Still, it ate at Merle, because he'd lived it. He knew what the food tasted like at 3 a.m. when you couldn't sleep, knew the sound of cell doors slamming shut for count, knew the specific terror of looking at a calendar and realizing you had 800 more days before your next parole hearing. And watching Johnny Cash become America's prison champion while Merle, the actual convict, played second fiddle, it created something dark in Merle's chest, something that tasted like betrayal. Which brings us back to that hallway at San Quentin in 1969. Johnny Cash was scheduled to record a live album there. At San Quentin would become one of his most successful records, following the massive success of At Folsom Prison the year before. The warden had invited several musicians and celebrities to attend as special guests. Merle Haggard was on that list. "Come see where you used to live," they said. "Come celebrate how far you've come." But Merle didn't feel celebratory. He'd started drinking at noon. By the time he arrived at San Quentin, walking through those gates again as a free man instead of a prisoner, something old and angry had risen up in him. He'd asked the guards to show him his old cell. They'd walked him through D Block, Tier 3. He stood there looking at the same concrete walls, the same narrow bed, the same bars. He could still smell it, still feel it. And when he walked backstage and saw Johnny Cash preparing for the show, something in Merle snapped. Cash noticed him first. "Merle, glad you could make it." Merle took a long pull from his whiskey. "Wouldn't miss it, watching you make history. Again." The tone was wrong. Cash knew it immediately. He'd known Merle for years. They'd performed together, respected each other's work. But something was different now. "You all right?" Cash asked. "I'm fine. Just been thinking." Merle moved closer. "You made millions singing about prison, Johnny. But you don't know what it's like, do you?" The hallway went quiet, and a guard at the far end sensed tension and took a step forward, hand moving toward his baton. Cash's voice stayed level. "I know enough." "No." Merle's voice was harder now. "You don't. You come here, you sing your songs, you leave. These men worship you, they think you understand them, but you're a tourist, man." He pointed down the hallway toward the cell blocks. "I lived there. Cell D35. I ate their food. I fought their fights. I watched men get stabbed over cigarettes. I spent 2.5 years learning how to sleep with one eye open." Cash didn't move, didn't speak. "And you?" Merle continued, his words coming faster now. "You spent a few nights in holding cells. You wrote a song about shooting a man in Reno, made it sound romantic, made it sound cool, but you're selling their pain, Johnny. You're making money off something you never lived." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Guards were watching now. A sound engineer in the doorway pretended to check cables while actually listening to every word. Johnny Cash stood perfectly still. His face revealed nothing, but inside, Merle's words had found their target. Because Cash had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. What right did he have? He'd been poor, yes. He'd struggled, yes. He'd fought addiction and demons and failures. But he'd never served real time, never faced years in a cage, never experienced the specific death of hope that comes from watching seasons change through prison bars. The silence stretched. Merle was breathing hard, emotional, waiting for a response. Finally, Cash spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "You're right." Merle blinked, not expecting that. "I wasn't here as long as you," Cash continued. "I didn't live it like you did. I'm not going to pretend I did." He took a step toward Merle. Not aggressive, just closer. "But I kept coming back, Merle. After the first show in '58, after the cameras left, after it stopped being good publicity, I kept coming back. Because these men don't need someone who lived it," Cash said. "They've got each other for that. They need someone who remembers them. Someone on the outside who gives a damn that they're still human." Merle's jaw tightened. "That's convenient philosophy for a man making millions." "You think I do this for money?" Cash's voice had an edge now, just barely. "I could fill stadiums every night, make twice as much playing Vegas. But I keep coming back here, to places like this, because when I was at my lowest, when the pills had me and I thought about eating a bullet, I remembered these men had it worse than me, and they were still fighting. He paused. So yeah, maybe I am selling something. Maybe I am profiting. But at least I'm showing up. What happened next would become legendary in country music circles, though different people tell different versions. Some say Merle threw his bottle against the wall and walked out. Some say he and Cash stood there for another minute, neither speaking, before Merle turned and left without another word. What's documented is this. Merle Haggard did not stay for Johnny Cash's San Quentin concert that day. He left the prison, drove back to his hotel, and didn't speak to Cash for 5 years. The show went on. Cash performed Folsom Prison Blues, performed A Boy Named Sue for the first time, and the inmates went wild. The recording became one of the best-selling country albums of all time. Johnny Cash's legend grew even larger. But backstage, after the performance, Cash sat alone in that same concrete hallway and wondered if Merle had been right, if he was an imposter, a fraud, a man profiting from borrowed pain. 5 years passed. Cash continued doing prison concerts, continued advocating for prison reform, continued writing songs about the forgotten and the damned. But he thought about Merle's words constantly. They'd burrowed deep. In 1974, late at night in a hotel room in Nashville, Johnny Cash picked up the phone and called Merle Haggard. The conversation lasted 3 hours. Nobody knows everything they discussed, but years later, Merle shared pieces of it in an interview. Cash had said, "Merle, you were right that night. I was selling something I hadn't fully earned, but I'm still going to sing for them, because nobody else will. And if my being there means one guard treats one inmate a little more human, then I'll keep going." And Merle had responded, "I know, Johnny. That's why I'm still mad you're better at it than me." They both laughed. Then they both cried. And the friendship was rebuilt, different now, but stronger. Years later, in 1990, Merle was asked in an interview about that night at San Quentin. What had really bothered him so much? His answer was quiet and honest. "I was jealous, not of his fame or money. I was jealous that he could carry that pain without it destroying him. I lived in prison and it nearly killed me. He visited prison and it made him better. That's what really made me angry. I thought suffering was supposed to be mine. But Johnny showed me that empathy is its own kind of suffering, maybe harder because you choose it." Johnny Cash died in 2003. Merle Haggard spoke at his memorial service. He told the story of San Quentin, told the truth about their confrontation. And he ended with this. Johnny Cash wasn't a convict, but he was convicted. Convicted that every person matters, that every man behind bars is still a man. He didn't need to live in a cell to believe that. He just needed to care. And he cared more than anyone I've ever known. The question that night at San Quentin was about authenticity, about who has the right to tell certain stories. But maybe the real question was never about lived experience. Maybe it was about what you do with your platform, what you do with your voice. Merle Haggard lived the prison life and turned it into poetry. Johnny Cash witnessed the prison life and turned it into advocacy. Both were real, both were necessary, both were forms of courage. And maybe that's the lesson from that concrete hallway in 1969, that suffering isn't a competition, that empathy isn't theft, that showing up consistently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people question your motives, that matters. Johnny Cash kept going back to prisons until his health wouldn't allow it anymore. He played for men who would never get out, sang for men the world had forgotten, and he never pretended to be one of them. He was just a man in black who remembered they existed. And sometimes that's enough.